September 18th, 2002, and I'm pleased to be here with Chancellor Phillip L at our institution, and also Professor of Urban Studies and Planning. Phil, I thought one of the things that would be very useful for us to discuss today is, first of all, to sort of get your impression of this term that I call bridge leader. And so if I describe the bridge leader as a small core of non-black faculty or non-minority faculty who have been instrumental in bridging cultural and racial and ethnic divisions and in transforming places of higher education into more welcoming and nurturing environments for minorities. These people also reach out who value cultural differences, racial diversity, and who recognize special challenges and dilemmas in generating a diverse workplace and educational setting, and in supporting minorities as we try to adapt to a mainstream white American institution. Could you reflect on this kind of definition and sort of indicate sort of things that you would add or delete or just your sense of it?
I think it's a very good definition. It captures some of the complexities of this style of leadership that focuses on the professional as well as the organizational and the social. I would add a couple of things. One is these individuals are often people who work at a very personal level. They try to identify individuals. They try to assess their strengths, their potential, and they then make the connection to opportunities in the organization. Sometimes doing it quietly, almost invisibly, other times doing it with almost like a bull in a china shop. And either way, it shows a bit of courage that is sometimes the organization appreciates it and sometimes it doesn't, but they can be very effective in bringing about change. The other thing I would say about this role is that they pay a lot of attention to empowering the person they're leading. It's not as though they're trying to carry somebody over a threshold. It's more that they're trying to help people who are new to a setting, new to an institution, identify the different avenues and paths to opportunity, to understand the institutional culture associated with getting access to them, and then making sure that there is encouragement and consistent encouragement to pursue it. And that's a great gift to anybody in an organization.
Well, that's very helpful.
And it's also important for an organization because if you don't have that, and we're talking about bridge leadership in the context of promoting diversity, every organization, business, educational, institutional, needs to have a way of making sure it can generate new leadership, that the right people in the right positions, and that the organizational culture is transparent to people who are expected to lead that organization. And so this kind of bridge leadership actually is something that any good organization will have. And I think the importance of the project in this context.
Steve.
This kind of bridge leadership is critical to an organization because it's the way an organization makes its institutional culture transparent so that the right people can be in positions to lead the organization forward and to integrate successfully. The bridge leader is obviously critical in the racial dimension because in the absence of that kind of leadership, black students or faculty or staff wouldn't quite understand how to access the opportunities in the organization, and will either not fully develop their talents or will eventually discover that maybe they aren't welcome or their talents could be best used somewhere else. And that would be an institutional loss.
Yeah. So essentially, I mean, what you really are really trying to, what you're really stressing is that these kind of individuals certainly make the environment much more positive for people who are different to begin to show their talent and to, by first being at ease that it's okay to be here. You know?
And that's right. And the university is unique in the sense that it not only attracts talent, that is students who will come to gain education, but also faculty. And the institution, if it's to be great, really has to focus on talent, on developing talent of its of bright young students and young faculty.
You know, one of the things that is very very positive, I think, here at MIT, and it's so important that we take advantage of it, is that I have never been at an institution that is that has so much diversity from all over the world, and within the institute, within the United States as well. But we really do. I think people are very shocked about the diversity that we have, particularly on our student body, and it really is a real positive wealth that we have in that sense. You know?
Yeah. I think it is. It's the undergrad. We've made a great deal of progress in undergraduate student diversification, and it's been stable over many years. We have a somewhat less even development of that diversity in the graduate student population. Some areas are more advanced in that regard than others. And faculty diversification remains a challenge. In the latter cases, this is obviously local and distributed as opposed to undergraduate admissions where we can set an institutional goal and apply fully the resources to compose a class that is diverse.
You mentioned a very important point that maybe you could elaborate a little bit more on it, and that is that, you know, at a university, certainly here at MIT, there are certain very specific things that we have control of that you can really do, which we have done, in fact, to increase the diversity on the undergraduate level. But when it comes down to the area, particularly of the faculty, you know, that's quite different. Wouldn't you say?
It is very different. With undergraduates, we're basically going out into a fresh talent pool, namely 11th graders, and saying who are the most promising young people out there. We present our case, we get the applications in, and we can sit down and compose a class. With faculty, you have vacancies that have a particular character in a job description, and you're trying to find a match between the characteristics of the best possible people for that position and the pool of people who are available at that point in time. Now, of course, we do try to go to other institutions and take their people, so it's not exactly working only with new talent.
Right.
But we do have a limited, a much more limited arena to operate. I guess if I were to sort of make a larger comment on that is that I'm old enough to remember when we talked as institutions about growing our own and about, well, gee, it's difficult to fill these positions now, but if we have graduate students who we develop into prospective faculty members, then we can, quote, grow our own and share. Well, American higher education did not do that. We have not greatly increased the production of PhD students. It has grown, but we have also lost many of those to industry because we've become not as attractive as academic positions once were for this population. So we have some, higher education has some work to do in diversifying the academy.
Yeah. Let me come back to what you were talking about earlier. In what ways have you been impacted by the presence or absence of bridge leaders in your career, in your education? I mean, what can you say about that arena? That obviously it's been some very positive things that have happened. Otherwise, there's no way you could be, the Chancellor of MIT.
I've had a charmed life in that regard, and I could go all the way back to elementary school teachers and neighbors, and my experience in the barbershop even. But I won't go back that far. I think if there's been anything, it's been that there have been always, and different people at different times and different settings, but always some individuals who went out of their way to offer me advice. And if there's anything that I can brag about, is that I took some good advice. And I certainly am aware that not everybody has that advantage, but I have had it, and it's benefited me greatly. Not just in my experience here at MIT over the years as a graduate student and a faculty member, but going back many years. And if there's anything that I think that I did to sort of make that process of taking advantage of the advice, is to listen. I can't do everything people suggest you do, but there's an awful lot of goodwill out there which people will sometimes give you, even if your advancement is not the main thing they're trying to do. I think there's a tendency for the old to share with the young.
When we talk about the bridge leaders, and in your case, would you look at some of the people, particularly faculty types? What are some of the kind of characteristics you think that you have been able to see through observation, through experience, that you think have been very, very positively related to this group of type people?
To some extent, it's hard to characterize this population because they include people who themselves benefited from bridge leadership in a previous generation or with a different ethnic group. They also include people who have had a life of privilege, and they were born into privilege and they've never lost it. So it's a great range of people on that dimension. Other characteristics are, one, there tends to be a genuine interest and curiosity in people, and they present as open to all people. You don't feel self-conscious or uncomfortable in their presence generally. They're able to convey a curiosity which is not nosiness, and they're able to frame their contributions in less threatening ways. Have you thought of, or this is another way of doing it? They're generally pretty open about their observations about your strengths. They're able to also identify things that you could change to strengthen your position. Occasionally they're skillful enough to be sharply critical in a way that makes this pain not hurt very long. And you sort of have the feeling that they have a genuine interest in your welfare, and so you're willing to take risk, and they're willing to sort of stick with you even when you make mistakes or fall short, because they've seen something, they see something which they're trying to nurture, and they're not going to allow a temporary setback to hold you back. they're generally positive people who will concede negative things about the institution or about their own department or their profession, but they are willing to go and ask you to go beyond what they see as negative with the promise that it can be different. They're good at visioning.
Well, I like the idea you mentioned. I mean, the fact that in general they are good people. I mean, they're just generally good people.
I think you make judgments about people, and they're smart people, they're good people, they're wise people, and then there are people who have opposite characteristics.
Right.
They make a suggestion, and you wonder, well, why did they make that suggestion? And bridge leaders, and I don't want to suggest that they're all perfect and lack individual agendas, but they're often pretty honest about it. That is, they will say, achieving success with you will make me feel good because I haven't been able to do it before. I mean, that's a pretty honest statement that, they're somehow betting on you is in much the same way we would bet on a horse.
Exactly.
But for a faculty member, that's not a bad way. I mean, to say that, I see something in you as a student and I'm going to push because I think we can make it. And they do mean we.
Yeah. That's excellent. I have one final question, and you may have talked about it a little bit, but I don't think it'll hurt to say a few more words about it, if you will. And that is, could you kind of comment on what you would consider, particularly here at this institution and other institutions you've been exposed to, including those, in other countries that I know you've visited. But what would you consider as best practices in bridge leadership? Specific programs or results that you have experienced and or observed over the years that you would consider, that's a very good practice in terms of diversity, in terms of doing something that has made the environment much more positive for people who are different.
This is tough. I can't think of a practice, that is a set of activities which I would say are ideal. Keep in mind, my early observation was that these are individuals, and they're individuals sometimes who are self-empowering. That is, nobody asks them to do this job. Nobody rewards them for doing the job necessarily. In fact, they sometimes do it at some risk or some cost. There are also people who probably would resist the label that would be associated with the program. So it's hard for me to say what represents practice other than I think if there's anything that supports this kind of emergence, the emergence of this kind of leadership, it is that there's an institutional leader, a president or a dean or a department head, who sends the signal that they respect this kind of outreach, that they respect this kind of support, that they expect senior people to help junior people and faculty to guide and develop students, and that they expect that without saying exactly how it's to be done or who is responsible for whom. I think that's a key ingredient. And then if there's a program or a label or some process, that helps, but I don't think there's any particular one that I could say is magical.